something, but I make some assumptions about all of us in this developer group about our understanding of certain things, and I lose sight of the fact that not all of us look at things the same way, and we all have different skills, and we all have different backgrounds and stuff, and so I don't think this is going to be very technical, but because of that, it might be, just because I don't think it's very technical doesn't mean it's not super technical for you. And so I'm saying this because I may tend to go a little too fast or whatever, and so just kind of slow me down. Hopefully we'll get through this in about an hour. It's after 1. I was a couple of minutes late, so I don't need to wait for anybody. Looks like we got a good gang. A lot of the names in this list I know for a fact are going to take most of this stuff for elementary information, but hopefully some of us can learn a little something about this. So let me share my screen, and we'll show you what I got going on here.
Sorry, there you go.
Okay. Show my screen. Let me get rid of all these faces so you guys don't have to look at yourselves. So the topic today, I don't even know if the title was in the email or not, I'm not real sure, but the topic today was something about data URLs. How can we use them? What do they mean? What are they for? We see them all over the place in our apps. How can we take advantage of them? Why do they cause problems? These kinds of thoughts. So I've got my little Xcode world running here. It's super simple. But I'm going to jump to the web, and I'm going to go to a forum post from Patty O, who's in Geelong. I don't know where that is. Maybe England somewhere. I'm not sure. It started out with an interesting conversation about how can I use a variable in my SQL calculations, my SQL queries. And then it quickly turned down the post to a different conversation about how do I get data from the device to my back end so that I can then construct my query. And so that's not even really a query question. It's more of a how do I get the data from the device? And so then the conversation shifted to this data URL and the merging of the variables and what does that mean and all this confusion around that. So we're going to try to shed some light on that so that you can understand a little bit about not just how a Buzztouch project is set up, but some basics about making HTTP requests and things like that. So we're going to talk about several different things. We're going to talk about HTTP requests. What is that? A super simple concept in my mind, but obviously it can get really complicated. So we'll spend a couple of minutes on that. We'll spend a couple of minutes on URLs. What is it? Obviously, we got to understand a little bit about that. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this concept of merging variables. You might hear this in the forum or something, and I'll shed some light on what that means. And then how are we going to handle this data or use this data in our back end? Because like Patty O was saying, it's one thing to have the data, but what do I do with it? Or he's trying to do something that he already knows, but he doesn't have the data. So there's just a few different things that we're going to do. And just like everything else, there's lots of approaches that people can take to solve the same kinds of things. Hopefully your Buzztouch project makes it easier to do it than doing it from scratch. That's kind of the idea. Certainly you can draw on a lot of other projects. But let me show you what I have going here. I have a very, very basic blank empty project. I've got a little note screen. Let me get my little notes here because that way I don't have to type stuff, and I'll show you what I'm doing here. So let me get rid of that. Okay, so we've got a one-screen app here. It's our plugin success is going to be our only screen that launches because our list of screens just has one item in it. Item ID for our first screen is 888. It could be 999. It could be whatever we want. We know that when our app launches, it's going to show this particular plugin, which comes with the core, so we don't have to worry about including it in our project. It is in the layout folder, plugin success. Simple little plugin with a little green thing on it we've all seen. We've given it a nickname of success, a navbar title text, and we'll run this in iOS 7. And, oh, I did change the project a tiny little bit. I gave it a background color in the navbar right here. Anyway, we've got a very generic one-screen app. It's not even really a screen. It's just our success screen. Just like we're used to, we can tap this button and wobble the picture. You'll notice that there's an information icon on the top right of the nav bar. That's because I did add a nav bar right button type, info light. And then I also added a nav bar right button tap load screen item ID. Say that all at once. So it's going to look for a screen with this ID URL. Could do anything, David URL, whatever we want to call it. We'll call it David URL. As we know right now, this doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because there's no other screens in our app. So if I were to tap that button right now, which I'm going to do, we will get the error view controller because it cannot find the plugin for a screen with this ID. So let's make that screen. I'm going to put a comma after my first screen so I can paste another screen here. And this was my cheat sheet. I'm going to copy my little screen JSON that I just whipped up a few minutes ago. I was just parked outside. So here's another screen. The data or the item ID, I should make it match our button item ID. So it's going to look for a screen with an item ID of David URL. The type of screen that I want to load is the one plugin that I threw in this project, which is super basic. I just copied another one, and I named it db_URL. So that's the plugin that we're going to load when we tap this button. I'll give it a nickname, and we'll just do a testing URL for a nickname, whatever. And I'll give it a navbar title text of fun stuff. So this plugin, all I did was copy the success plugin and rename the class. So it's going to have our same little button on it. Right? It looks just like the other one, but I put a label up here, data URL results. But we're going to load this plugin when we tap this right-hand button. So let's make sure that that's true. And I'm just going through this setup to show you just how easy I can throw together some screens as a sample. We don't need to be super sophisticated about this. So when I tap this button now, we get our data URL plugin. And that's all that does. So now we have a screen that we can use, this data URL plugin, as the basis of our conversation. So to save us a little bit of time and having to go back and forth, I'm going to take that screen and put it in the first, make it the first screen in our list so that it loads first so that we don't have to tap the little navigation button, if that makes sense. We could throw this plugin success one away altogether if we wanted. We'll just move it down. So there's our setup. So let's have a look at, let's launch this again and make sure it does what we expect. Let's have a look at that plugin I made before we can talk about these other concepts, because we have to start talking about HTTP requests and data URLs and all that kind of stuff. So let's use that. So why don't we connect something to this button besides this goofy little wobble that I got going. Let's make a request from the internet for some data, maybe from our own back end, and put those results from that data in this label right here. Right now the label's data URL results. Let's put the results of our request in that box. Certainly you'd be doing all different kinds of things with your results. But the context is we're going to send some variables from the device to the back end and then return them so that we can demonstrate that kind of back and forth relationship. Okay, so if we look at our data URL file here, I got to cheat it again. There we go. If we look at our data URL interface, we've got two properties. We've got label results, and we've got button get results. Both of these are IB outlets, so in interface builder we can make connections to them. We've got an IB action called wobble image, right, and another simple one called wobble ended. That's what's going on when we click the button. Those are standard out of the plugin success plugin. So let's get rid of this wobble ended thing, and let's call this fetch data. We've got a method now called fetch data in our interface, and now in our implementation file we got to fix that. Right? We threw this one away. We changed the name of this method to fetch data. So now we've just got a super simple plugin. It's got the view did load. We don't even need that. We're not using it for anything. We got one method in here. Very, very simple. It's called fetch data, and it's an IB action, so we do need to connect that to our button. So this button, if we look at the connections, Remember we had wobble image, that doesn't exist anymore. So we want to connect the fetch data action to this button. Touch up inside. And again, lots of ways to do this. I'm demonstrating it using Interface Builder, just kind of going back and forth from code to UI. Just a lot of us like Interface Builder, a lot of us don't. We could have connected that action to this button in code very easily. We just use this. We've got the label here for the results connected to this label here. And then we got a button there. So when we click that button, let's prove to ourselves that our fetch data method is going to run. So far, pretty elementary, but we're about to get into the URL part here in a sec. So the way that we know it's going to run, I'll clear my console so it's blank, and when we click this button, you can see the console every time I click it. It's fetching, it's firing that method that doesn't do anything right now. Mm-hmm. So let's stop in Xcode for a second. Stop in Xcode for a second, and let's talk about what a data URL is. So I'm going to get rid of Patty's forum post. I'm going to get rid of my GoToMeeting thing, and I'm going to sit right here on this URL. This is actually, here we go. So this is an internet address. We call them URL, Uniform Resource Locator. I think that's what it is, Uniform Resource Locator. So this, we all understand what this is, but I'll make sure we do more literally right now. The first part of a URL identifies the server that you're making a request to. The second part of the URL after the slash refers to the file that you are requesting. So in this case, we're saying, hey, Internet, find this machine on the Internet and tell it I want this file. And that web server is going to return us that file. So that is the most basic way to explain what an HTTP request is. We're making a web request. So when I type in an address and I hit enter, that's what's happening. This is the results of that file. Very, very simple. So on my server, this is the file. It's an HTML document, just as simple as you could possibly imagine, that our server is returning to us. So we could say, and it's fun, right? So I can change this file on my server, and every time I make a request, I'm going to get the newest, latest file. That's all we're doing here. So we're using a browser to do this. This has nothing to do with PHP, has nothing to do with phones. It's just a browser making a web request. So I'm saying this because our phones, our projects, our apps are capable of making the same exact request as a browser. Everyone tends to confuse it a lot when they get it into Objective-C or they get it into the context of making an app. It's the same concept. Hey, phone, make a request to something, do something with the results. That's the basis of this whole conversation. So let's change this file for purposes of this discussion to a PHP. I mean, it's already got a PHP file extension, but let's run a little PHP in here instead of our generic HTML. We'll throw that away, and we'll use PHP to do the exact same thing. We'll just output some raw data.
That's my boy.
So Roscoe from where?
Oh, well, there's an asteroid going by, but I don't know when it's going to actually happen.
We're getting hit by asteroids?
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so everyone, hopefully you're on the same page here. I just turned this into a dynamic document. That's all I did. It's PHP now. But it's the same idea. We're making a request for it, and we're getting the results. So we're cool. So let's take this web address and put it into our app. Let's make a string called, I don't know, my URL. And that's what we want to request something from. Okay? So when we get the results of the request, we haven't decided yet what we're going to do with them. Maybe we'll shove them in that label or whatever. But the point is, it's just a URL at this point. We're going to get to the merging of the variables and all that. I'm trying to go quick. So we could get out the documentation in Objective-C and make what's called an NS URL connection or request, or I can't remember. Let's find the document here. Yeah, NSURL connection, and we could go through this whole class file with all the methods and all the complex stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. Or you can use what lots of our other plugins use, which is in your project. In the core file, we have a little downloader class you can use. So this downloader class, its whole purpose in life is to help you fetch stuff from the internet quicker. Right? Instead of writing a bunch of code, you say, hey, downloader, go get this thing. That might be a picture, that might be a PDF document, otherwise known as a binary file. That might be a web page, which is text. Might be some JSON, right? Some structured data. Who knows what it is? But the downloader makes it real easy for us to grab that. In our case, we're just getting some simple text called "Hi there," right? It's just some text. So let's use our downloader and see what happens. So I'm back to my little cheat sheet. Just to save time, let's get our method here to do something. So we're saying create an instance of our downloader, right? Buzztouch downloader. We named it downloader. I could have called it my downloader. Whatever, my downloader. Initialize it, set the save as file name. If you looked at that downloader class, you would see that if we gave this a file name, after it downloaded the data, it would save the results to a text file. But we don't care about that. We're just going to shove them in the label. We have to tell the downloader what we're downloading, right? Like binary data, image data is binary data. We're downloading text, plain text. So we want to tell the downloader what we're downloading. Now we want to use a URL, our URL right here, okay? And then we want to tell it, you'll notice this warning, I'm doing this on purpose. We want to tell the downloader that its delegate, the file, the class that's listening for its progress, is this file itself, this class that we're in. And so Xcode's giving us a little warning because we haven't implemented any of those delegate methods. And what I mean by that is the downloader will tell your class, hey, I've started the download. Hey, I'm in progress. I'm downloading 10%, 20%, 30%. Hey, I'm done. Right? You might need to know when those events occur so that you can act accordingly. Right? You don't want to try to update an image, for example, if you don't know the image is downloaded yet. So let's implement the BT downloader protocol in our class here. And so in our BT downloader download file delegate. So if we looked at this in our class, you will see that we have three methods that it will report to us. It'll report download file started, download file in progress, download file completed. Awesome, just what we want. So those are the three methods that we're going to implement, copying them, in our simple little plugin. And when we do that, you will see that our warning goes away because Xcode's saying, ah, I see, you have implemented the delegate methods for this class. The reason that we didn't have to, and it only showed us a warning instead of an error, is because these delegate methods are optional. You'll see in the downloader class, we said, hey, the class that's using the downloader may or may not implement these three methods. If you don't implement them, Xcode's saying, hey, you might want to do this because they're kind of cool, and you can use them for all different kinds of reasons. Think of a table view delegate protocol, right? It tells you when it's about to build each row. It tells you when it refreshes. It's the same concept. It's just a delegate for our downloader. So I'm going to close this up. We're going to go back here, and the last line is after we set up our, let's say, set up our downloader. Set up our downloader. After we set it up, we want to tell it, hey, download the file. Ask it to get the file, which would probably be more accurately described as get the results. Because you and I both know that we're not fetching a file, we're just fetching a, technically we are, but we're just fetching what will end up being hi there, just a simple little short string. So, but the same concept is the same. So go ahead and get it. So what's going to happen when it does that, and that won't happen until we tap our button, right? Fetch data method is the button the action connected to our button. So I'm going to clear the console here. I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see what the heck happens, so that we know what's happening. So fetch data got printed as soon as I clicked the button. Okay? Downloader initialize, or init, it printed from the Buzztouch downloader class as soon as we created it. So we know that our console that, hey, the downloader is telling us, awesome, I just ran the init or init method. Cool. The downloader itself is also telling us, okay, I'm downloading this file. Because right here we said download file. So the delegate's telling you, I'm doing that. It's telling the console this. It's telling the console this. It's also reporting back to our delegate, which is this class we're working on, our plugin, that I started, right here, started download. It happened so fast that the download in progress didn't even happen more than once. It's just like, hey, I'm done. This will rattle off, 100, 200, 300, 400, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? For big, heavy web pages or things, that will rattle it off. And I'll demonstrate that in just a sec. And then download file completed. It's done. So let's get a heavier web page to see if we can get some reports from the in progress. We'll go to ESPN. They're usually pretty heavy. And we'll make an HTTP request to ESPN.com. And I'm guessing it's this big, ugly, heavy, image-filled, yeah, this thing's going to be brutal, right? So it's going to take our phone a little bit more time to fetch this thing. Right? It's still not done in my real browser. It's just crazy. So let's see what our phone does. It's still text. It's still a web page, right? Don't confuse the idea that it's got all kinds of graphics and crazy stuff that you're looking at. If I view source, it's still just plain old text that the browser's getting. So that's what we want. So I'm only doing this to demonstrate that our progress, show progress, our delegate report for the progress is going to take longer, and we should get more reports. 1%, 2%, 3%, that kind of thing. So let's watch this console. Whoops, what happened here? Okay, here we go. Let's watch this console. GoToMeeting has taken over my computer. When we fetch the results of this URL. See here? Oh, it says success. It's probably not returning to us what I want. It's probably saying, hey, you're mobile, you can't do this. Bad example. The point is trust me that you'll get reports 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% for big, heavy things. I'm going to move away from that because it's going to take away from our time. Let's go back to our example. Okay. So we have a simple HTTP request going on to this web page that does nothing. Let's prove that we can make dynamic data. What can we do? Date, hours, or days, minutes? I can't remember. Day, month, year. Is that all right? Can we do that? Let's echo the date so it changes all the time. Or is it seconds? I can't remember the PHP date formatting. SSII maybe? Let's look. I just want it to change each time we do it. It's not going to let me. Oh well. I don't have any error trapping, nothing going on in this super simple example. So back to the other idea. So let's introduce a variable into our URL and start talking about this merging of variables, because that's what this topic is. We spent the first 30 minutes just in setup because we have to understand what is it that we're trying to do before it can make any sense. So hopefully you got something out of that. If you didn't, I apologize. So let's put in here first name. And we'll say David. Okay? We're passing a variable named first name in the URL to our web server. So the first name is the name of the variable or the property. These are called key value pairs. So this is the key and this is the value. And we're passing David in as the value. So if we go to our PHP script and we want to get the first name from the URL, we have to make sure that it's set. There's all these weird little rules about, you know, data, where it's coming from, and whether PHP will let us do it. If is set get first name, the name of the variable or the key, right? If this is set, let me typos here. I don't think so. Anybody see an error? My eyes are really bad. Let's see. If is set get. Oh, I need another parentheses. Then let's echo the value of that variable. So get is the keyword that we use to, quote, get it from the URL. Else, echo, there was no first name proper key in the URL. We'll just do that. So in this case, let's test it with our browser first. There was no first name key in the URL because we don't have that up here. So let's put first name equals Billy. So now it says Billy, just like we would expect. So on our phone, it should return David. Okay? And when we get these results, which are going to be returned in this message, download file completed, let's set the value of our label results, set value in our label to the results. So we don't have to keep messing with the console. So self dot label results, set text, message. So message is returned by our delegate as a string, which are the results. Okay, so let's run that, make sure that works. It should. Awesome. Oh, that says success. That's not what we want. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Code red. I thought our results were in our message string. Oh, you know what? Ah! Let's do this. Let's change. See how it's returning success here every time?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a success or fail. I've forgotten my own code. Let me go back to the downloader and see what happens when it finishes. Download file completed. Sends a message. In progress, completed, cancel, download file. I'm looking at all the methods here. Post URL. Let me go down here to, these are all the different types of files you can tell it to get. PDF, HTML. Aha! We want to set the file type to return. I thought we could leave it blank. So we told it, don't worry about the file name, save as file type. We want return. That means return it back to our class file when you're done.
David, is that something that you set when you
There you go.
and when you wrote the method, or is that just how iOS works?
No, this is a custom class that's in your Buzztouch project called the BT Downloader. So you need to look at the BT Downloader to see what methods are available and what properties are available. Okay. So one of the properties is save as file type, and I was in error. I assumed, it's been so long since I looked at it, that if I didn't give it a file type or I gave it text, it would return us the results. And instead, that's not what it's doing. It expects you to save the results to the cache. And so if I had to use the word return to get them back, and the way that I discovered that is I looked at the class itself. I just looked at it. I just went to the downloader. Where is it again? Here it is. And I just looked at the connection did finish loading. Like, what happens when you're done, dude? How come you're not giving me your results? And it says right here.
All right. Yeah.
You know, so I just looked at the class.
Okay. I get it.
Yeah. There's almost no cases, and this is actually probably not the best example. There are almost no cases where you want to fetch stuff and not do anything with it. You're generally saving it to a file or putting it in a database or something like that. We're just taking the results and shoving them in this label. So David. So let's put another variable in there called device latitude. Okay? And we'll do, I don't know, 38.2336. This is going to help address specifically the forum post. So device latitude is the new property name. Right? It's not first name anymore. It's device latitude. And we've given it a hard-coded value, 38.2345, which is going to be the same thing every time. It's just a fixed value, which speaks to the problem we're trying to address, right? That changes over time. Our device moves around, blah, blah, blah. So now that's the variable that we've sent to the back end in our URL, made a request, and when the request came back, we put it in our label. So we want to talk about now, I'm going to change gears, this concept of data URLs in your control panels. So all you're doing when you add a data URL to your control panel is you're injecting that data URL into your configuration file, right? So all you're doing is this. Instead of hard typing the value, like we have in our code here, instead of hard typing the value, by putting it into your control panel, you're entering it into the JSON data. So we've all seen these. We see data URLs all over the place in our projects and our config data. We see them up here in our overall, we see them in the report to cloud, we see them in the register, we see them all over the place. So let's move it to our configuration file so that we can get it more in line with what we normally see in a Buzztouch project. So now we can't hard code it here, because if we hard code it, it's going to be the same for everybody, right? It's going to be the same for everybody. So I'm going to use the BT strings class, and I'm going to say get JSON property value for this screen's data named data URL, and give it a default value of nothing. All right, this value is going to equal this value, because I could have wrote 25 or 30 lines of code that said open the JSON, parse it, look for a property, look for a field, look for this screen, but that doesn't make any sense. We all are hopefully used to by now just asking the strings class to do that for us. Hey, go get this value from the JSON for this screen. The name of the property I'm looking for is data URL. If it doesn't exist, I don't want anything back. Just give me nothing. And assign it to this variable right here. So the results of this are going to be exactly the same thing as before, but we moved our URL to our config file, because that's what control panels do. So the control panel here does the same thing. Remember? We're all used to this. But you'll notice that there's a little link here that says about sending device data in URLs. This is where people tend to lose their mind. They lose their mind. They freak out. We don't want our URL to be the same. Where is it again? 38.22365. We don't want it to be that. We want it to be dynamic. We want it to be something that the phone is aware of. So we're going to merge. We're going to use a merge field. Remember the days when you printed labels with Microsoft Word and you had the little brackets around first name, last name, address, and it's the same thing, right? This merging concept of taking data and doing form letters, for example. It's just like that. Here's the list of Christmas card names. Print me all these labels. It's the same concept. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take our data URL, not the name of the property. It's still device latitude. We can call this my latitude, or Joe, we call it whatever we want. I'm just saying device latitude because my back end is expecting that. So the back end needs to know what you called it, right? Or you'll never be able to retrieve it when it comes in the URL. You'll never be able to get it back.
As long as it's spelled the same, it'll work, right?
As long as it's spelled the same, yeah. You can't exactly. So I just made a typo there. Exactly right. And so as long as you have the name of the key, you decide. Yeah. That's the whole point of variables, right? You decide what the key is called, and you actually, frankly, you decide the value. Right here we're saying send this every time. Yeah. We want to send other things like the Buzztouch app ID, the ID of the screen, the user ID, the user's email. the device's ID, right? The device's model. We want to send this stuff. So just for a fun little kick here, let's put device model right here in our URL, right? We're telling our backend to grab the value for device latitude, and it's going to give us device model in brackets, because that's what we're sending. That doesn't do any, we're not changing it, we're just being silly at this point. But it demonstrates a good point. Oh, device latitude. Do I have a typo?
You
Oh,
do,
I do have a typo.
you have latitude spelled wrong. I was kind of kidding, but
Latitude. No, that's fine. It's important.
there you go. Yeah, so spelling does matter.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so device model in brackets, because that's what we sent. So we don't want to send that. We want to send the actual device model. So we want to merge, app variables or Buzztouch variables, whatever you want to call them, in the URL before we send it. Right? We got to change that URL. We got to get those square brackets where it says device model and throw them away and put the actual device model in there. That's the difference. So we're going to say my URL equals, once again, we're going to go back to our super favorite strings class, the BT strings class, and we're going to merge BT variables in string. It's taking one argument, the original URL, right? So now, watch what happens in our console and watch what happens in our results. And bad URL. This is a good point. I did this, not intentionally, but I'm glad this is happening. Why is this a bad URL? I'll show you why. Some of these things are really, really important to understand. All of these things. I'm going to clear this console. We're going to do this again. Same result. Look at our method here. I'm in our console. Fetch data happened when we hit the button. Hey, Buzztouch strings class. Merge the variables. So it's telling you no problem. Here's the URL before I did it. Okay, before, and here's the URL after I did it. So the URL after is right here. You can see that the value of device latitude changed to iPhone simulator with a space there. Before it was device latitude was device model in brackets. In fact, let's change that to device model just so we don't confuse ourselves. Let's go to our script here and get device model. That way we don't just got to keep this all in the same thing. I'm trying to demonstrate that it doesn't, you decide what these things are called. I'm confusing, I think, everybody. So let's go back to our data URL and change that to device model, the name of the key. And let's look at this URL again. So after the merge, it had iPhone space simulator for the name of the device. So if I use a regular browser and I make that request, watch what happens.
Oh, yeah.
There's device model. See how it says iPhone simulator? Just what we want, right? But look what happened to the address bar. The browser said, wait a minute, spaces are not legal characters in HTTP requests. You can't have spaces. We have to replace those spaces with a special character. Mm-hmm. So a browser does that for us, but the phone does not. Mm-hmm. The phone does not, which is why we got a result of bad request. This is iOS saying, dude, you tried to make a request, and this URL is no good. It's no good. So you will see throughout our code, your code, my code, everybody's code. Let me go back to my cheat sheet. You will see throughout our code, let me find a better example of it. Let's see here. If we go to, I want to show you. Let me get rid of that. Let me show you where you'll see it all the time. I don't want to just stick it in there because you'll get confused. Let's go to this one. if you look at all kinds of load data methods and all kinds of class files, this is indexing here, hang on. You'll see it, everybody does the same thing because it's really important. And the technical term is called escaping the URL. You're escaping the URL. And the reason that you're doing that, see here we've got a download data method in some other gallery. This is Max Image Gallery. Get the URL and then we escape it. I went to this other project, to this other plugin to show you that you'll see this all over the place, and this is exactly why. Because if you don't escape it, it's not going to be a legal URL. So after you merge the variables, you don't know what you're going to get. Let's say you merged first name and the guy's name was Johnny apostrophe space Appleseed comma, you know, Michigan or whatever. He's going to jack up your URL and you won't even know it. And so things aren't going to work right. That's why we escape them. So you'll see that all over the place. There are times, and I won't get into it today, but there are times when you don't want to escape it, so we don't do it automatically for you. But I'm going to create a new string called escaped URL, and I'm going to escape this URL, and then we're going to make the request to the clean one, quote unquote, the clean one. So it will be the same result as our regular browser. The same result as our regular browser, so that we don't get broken, right? And that's good that we talked about that, because on some things, the iPhone simulator, on some things you don't have you know, that same situation, but look at our merge now. It looks the same to your eye because, believe it or not, the console doesn't print those escape characters in the white and black and white. It's really confusing sometimes, but just know as a programmer, you don't want spaces in your URLs. People drive you crazy when they send you a Word doc named, you know, baseball space scores space Tuesday.docx. It's like, really, dude? You're killing me with this, right? Just take those spaces out of your file names, right? That's my tip of the day. Email clients break. Everything breaks when you put spaces in things. And other characters. It's not just spaces. But anyway, so that is how we merge variables in our URL. So let's merge a couple more to show you. Let's go back to that user ID thing. Right? What if I wanted to merge the user ID? This is a good one, or the user email. Let's do user email. If I merge a field called user email, user email will be the name of our key, and we'll merge in here the merge fields. Watch what we get here. Let's look at user email. Let's get it to user email. Let's echo this. We'll put a space after that one because we're going to print two things here. So we'll print the device model, then we'll do user email, which is going to be blank, by the way, and you might ask why. I'll show you here in a sec. Okay, so we'll run this. Perfect timing. We got 10 minutes to go. I think we got through this pretty well. So we'll run this again, and you'll see that iPhone simulator is all we get. User email is blank. Mm-hmm. User email is blank, and the way that I know that is if I look at my console. Sometimes it's easier just to paste it in your address bar. It's easier to read. Look at the value of user email. There's the key, equals, and then it's blank. There's nothing here. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say, you know, David@buzztouch.com. Mm-hmm. If it did, we'd get it printed here. The reason that is, I'm not logged in, quote unquote. How does this app know my email address? There's no way it's going to know my email address or my user ID or my first name. So the login plugin does exactly that. That's why the login script exists, so that you can go to a server and figure out who I am, save it on the device so that when you want to make a future request, you can merge those into a URL. You might make a future request for my picture or something, and you need my user ID to go to your folder of pictures that are myid.jpg or whatever. Right? So the user ID, the user email. So some of these values that are dynamic, like these, like device latitude, for example, they're not always available. It depends on the context of your app. For example, device latitude and device longitude, can you think of a few cases where it's not going to be available? Maybe the users turned off their GPS. Maybe you didn't turn on the GPS when the app launched. Who knows? They're not always there. And so I would suggest that you just simply go to the Buzztouch strings class, which is in the core, and you look at that merge variables in string method, merge variables in string, and you see the things that we're looking for, right? Looking for the app ID, looking for the screen ID, looking for the user's information, looking for the device. So clearly, if the app delegate.root_user.user ID is blank, then you're not going to get it. App delegate.root_user.user email. App delegate.root_device.device, latitude, these kinds of things. These become available with values when certain things become true, when the GPS reports because it was on, when a user logs in. We can easily hand type in the user's name and email, but that wouldn't accomplish what we want to accomplish. We need them to be dynamic. So that's why we have this merge variables in string. You might have another thing that you add here, right? My own custom variable of some sort. Maybe you have some other property here that you want to merge in other variables throughout your app. Well, it would be a great place to add it in this method so that everywhere you use it, it works. Maybe you're constantly tracking, the velocity of the phone walking down the street or something, and you need to know data about that constantly with every request. You could do that. You could track that and then merge it into the URL. So that is the technical presentation. I'm happy to take questions. There's always lots of questions with these kinds of concepts because, again, everybody comes from a different background. So I hope that was useful to you, even if you knew what web programming was all about. Hopefully, Patty O can now run his background. What's the name? Hopefully, he can run his background query, the MySQL query, based on the radius he was trying to figure out. Is I think what was going on in terms of trying to figure out what locations are close to the device. Makes perfect sense. Get the latitude, get the longitude, run your query, return the results, boom, all good. What do you think, Sue? Worthwhile? I think we pulled it off. Can't hear anybody.
I think I muted. My dog was making some noise. Sorry about that. I'm back. I don't see any questions in the chat, but there must be some questions on this.
I must have done well.
How many people have used a merge variable in an app?
Say that again?
Who on the group has used a merge variable in an app? All the time. Smug, yeah. Smug was helping Patty O this morning.
Yeah, it works great. It works fantastic.
Yeah.
The hardest part, the two biggest things that get everybody on that are the escaping, because they don't expect the data that ends up in the URL, like the user's name. Mm-hmm. They got a weird name with a funky character or something. That kills things. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the values are blank sometimes and they don't know why. Mm-hmm. My device latitude is blank. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Is your GPS on? Is it reporting? Does the user let that happen? Let's break this down. There's always going to be a reason for it. Mm-hmm. So that's where your back end needs to be a little bit aware of that. Hey, sometimes this is just not going to arrive. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff.
And Smug is kind of focusing on doing things that know where the person is for the plugins he's making and the things he's working on.
Nobody in our group. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was a good conversation. I get a little bit. It's hard for me to what's the right word? To know what topics to talk about sometimes. This really didn't have a whole lot to do with Objective-C or iPhones. This was really mostly just basic web programming concepts. We took a string and we took some data out of it and replaced it. We made a web request. We did something with the results. That's not really phone-centric, but it does relate to Buzztouch because we shed some light on how we merge those variables, and that's going to be true in Android and iOS and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. Niraj is saying, talking about data URL next time, let's talk about caching of that content. Let's talk about it right now. It makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Remember, our downloader thinks that we're going to save the results. So let's say that you saved a file from your web server that was, I don't know, a letter to mom, a full-on file, text, HTML, whatever. The downloader wants to, by default, as we demonstrated from my forgetting, by default it wants to save it to the cache on the phone. So your plugin probably isn't just going to jump to the downloader and say, go get me mom's letter. It's probably going to say, hey, if this file is already on the device, means you already got it, then put it here. If it's not on the device, then go download it and save it. So and you see that all over the place too, right? So if you use a data URL for a map, for example, and it provides a bunch of JSON locations, that text file just gets saved to the device so that it doesn't have to download it every time. And then it's available for offline use. And so what we do, and you'll see in code all the time, you'll see the Buzztouch File Manager class, BT File Manager. If Buzztouch File Manager class file does exist, great, read it and use it. Else, BT downloader, go get it and save it with this name so that I know the next time I can go get it. Is there an easy way on first run of an app use the bundled data file, and then there will be a check to see if the data URL has an update to that bundled file? I have no idea what Niraj is saying. Let me slow down a minute.
Oh, Niraj, let me unmute. Oh no, I don't have you muted, Niraj. If you want to talk.
Well, this makes perfect sense to me, Niraj. This makes perfect sense to me. So easy is a relative word. Easy is a relative word. Here's how I would do that. I'll restate the question. When the app first launches, I want to use a file that's in my project that I bundled with it. I put it in BT whatever, BT images. It could be an image, a Word doc, a PDF, whatever. Let's call it a PDF. I put a PDF in BT docs in my project. So he's saying, is there an easy way on the first run of the app to use the bundled file? That makes sense because clearly it's never downloaded anything. Right? It's never been used before, so it wasn't online, whatever. They launched the app and you want it to be fast. And then go see if another new one exists. So this is where people lose their mind a little bit, because they think that somehow the phone is going to magically know if a new one exists or not. There's no way for the phone to know if your PDF is different on your back end somewhere. So you have to write a little script somehow on your back end that does something to return a value of like last modified or something for a file. So your phone is going to have to go hit that URL, grab the last modified date, which is, by the way, what the report to cloud method does. It just tells you the last time the app was modified. That's what it returns. Take that date and save it on the phone, probably in NS user defaults. Once again, BT strings, save preference, PDF last modified, and save that value on the device. So the next time the thing launches, you go get it again, and the question becomes, how often do you pull for changes? Right? It's a perfectly good question. So if this is saved on the device, use it. Else, use the one in the project. That's how I would do it. Super popular question.
Okay, I'm going to turn off the recording. Now you can say what you really think.